One Santa Cruz Heckler, but not any Santa Cruz Heckler. This is the bike of Trials Maestro, Danny MacAskill. Now, Santa Cruz have very recently launched this bike. It's the all-new Heckler. It comes in a range of wheel sizes. You can either have the bike as a specific 29 front and rear or 29 27.5, which is called the Heckler MX. Now, the bike comes in a range of sizes from small up to XXL. This is Danny's bike in size medium. Danny is 5'8", and he's running it in the MX spec as it is. Now, the big news on this bike is we've now got a 720 watt-hour battery in the down tube there, which is easily removable with a 4mm Allen key. Shimano EP8 motor. We've got a flip chip on here to change the geometry. Danny's running it in the high setting, which means the geometry on this bike, off the top of my head, is a 455 reach, 64.8 head tube angle, 77 seat tube angle, 445mm chainstay, and a 346mm bottom bracket height in the high setting, 342 in the low setting. Right, let's have a look at some of the componentry on the bike. Let's start up front. Now, I'm going to let Danny talk about the tyre setup and the brakes on this bike. But the wheels, we've got the Santa Cruz Carbon Reserve 30s up front, and on the back is the Reserve 30, but that's in the downhill spec, 36 spokes. Now I'm going to take a quick interlude here because the guys in the joinery have just fired up the planer. So we're going to go just over the pond. Where was I? I was on wheels, right? Okay, the Santa Cruz Reserve wheels with Industry 9 hubs on there. Now, up front, obviously, the Santa Cruz Heckler comes in a range of different models. This particular bike has got the Fox 36 up front, and the Deluxe, I do believe, the Deluxe RockShox shock in the back there. SRAM axis gearing, 12 speed, 165 cranks on there. Fox transfer dropper post on there, WTB Volt saddle. Now, one thing I need to mention is you can either go for the 29 27.5 or the 29 29 version of this bike. If you go for the 29, it means you're going to have a slightly different swinging arm area in the back there, which is, I do believe it's 460mm chainstay instead. I have to say there's some really nice chain protection in this area. When I rode the bike, super quiet, and as I mentioned earlier, really planted feel to it. Looks like there's an E13 chain guide on there. I think time now though to chat to Danny about some of the specific parts which he's got on this bike. Now, I was lucky enough to have a brief spin on this Heckler up in the mountains of Totto, and I have to say that it sits and feels incredible. It's light and it's lively, and I have to say, Danny, it looks pretty good, right?
Certainly does. Yeah, I'm pleased with it.
Now, it's been 2 years, right, since the launch of the Heckler. I think you did it out in Italy.
Yep, that's right.
A couple of years ago. But give us an idea of the time you've spent on the Heckler in the past 2 years.
Well, I've actually had two of the original Hecklers, and both of which have done about 67,000 kilometres each.
Whoa.
And every time I'm out riding, that's a lot of vertical. I would love to actually know, I don't use any of the kind of apps that record your rides, so that's a lot of descending and a lot of thrashing. So they can really take a beating, I can say that.
So it's fair to say then, you're quite into the old e-bike, right?
Yes, it's definitely fair to say that. I mean, I'm totally and utterly addicted to it, really. I'm out every single day. I'm out, doing some rides, whether it's from the doorstep here or way up in the mountains behind us.
Yeah.
So,
Danny, let's talk about some details. I talked about some of the other things earlier, but I see there's some very Danny MacAskill specific parts on this bike. First of all, the tyres. Been with Continental now quite a few years. What's the tyre setup?
I'm running the Continental Kaiser Protect, Apex Protect with a slightly thicker casing. I think they're a great tyre. I mean, it's winter now, and I might change to the Mud King.
Oh, the good old Mud Kings.
I do love a mud tyre. It's muddy, steep trails around here, and I mean, the main thing for me when I'm riding the e-bike, the main advantage you've got over riding the mountain bike is obviously its climbing ability. So I think having the Mud King, especially on the rear, just allows you to kind of get up, clean more climbs, which is what it's all about. So Pressures, I don't actually know. I mean, I'm also running the rim packed inserts front and rear on the bike. They've saved my day many a time, you know, making some mistakes, and you can just batter through everything. And if you do get a puncture, you can either try and fix it, or you can even just ride back to the van and go out again the next day.
I have to say, I was fortunate enough to have ridden the Magura MT7s a few weeks ago, and I don't mind saying, I think it's the best brake on an E-mounted bike, full stop. Looks like you got 220 discs on you, Danny, but give us an idea. There's different levers on there, right?
Yeah, so I've been running the MT7s for years now. They're so consistent. As you say, they just always have the same brake bite and everything like that, really consistent. Big 220 rotors. I've got actually 3D printed titanium levers on my bike. It's a very cool thing that Magura do for their riders. They did it for Luke Bruni as well. It's just basically the HC3 lever with a different end, just going for even more power on the brake.
But people can buy the HC3 lever.
Yeah, so you can buy the HC3 lever. I've just got a slight extension on the, you know, we're trialing out some different ends.
Yeah. And it's an interesting position you got the levers there. They're quite, I mean, some people would find that maybe quite odd to have that, but I guess when you do some super technical riding, so that's the natural position for your brakes, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, on the trials bike, I run my brakes pretty much in line. If you're standing up on the bike, it's like almost in line with your forearm. You know, that's kind of the reason I run them down that far is that in the past, I mean, for years, I've actually almost bent levers with the pressure I put on them because of the trials. You know, and if they're too high and I do a big trials move with the handlebars are at my thighs, there's loads of pressure going on there. So I run them down. They're out the way as well if you crash, you know, more out the way. And yeah, it's probably not great for the big alpine descents. I would probably pull them up a little bit. But I mean, I'm just so used to it down there, it just feels completely natural.
Some of the details of the up front area here, we've got Danny's own signature grips on here. They're quite thin grip, aren't they?
Yeah, I like to run quite a thin grip so you get a good hand wrap. You know, just, it kind of, again, comes from the trials bike. It's mainly just so I can really hold on tight.
There's a Santa Cruz handlebar in here. It's 35mm by 800. I really like the shape of this bar, Danny. Got a BikeCheck stem on there, and you seem to run quite a few spacers on the above the head tube there. I guess it's quite a low head tube on there, so the bars are reasonably high, right?
Yeah, I tend to run the bars pretty high on the bike. I mean, I may put a 5 or 10mm on the top at some point when I've played with the bike a bit more. But I find the higher bars makes it easier to manual the bike, you know, maneuver the front end. And then when you're also going down the really steep trails, it keeps the front end a little bit higher as well. So
Talk about the gearing then. We discussed this yesterday, you know, the technical terrain that you ride in. Have you been, or are you going to change the gear on the bike?
I mean, the gearing is something I've been playing around with, and as I say, you're trying to get every advantage in climbing. So at the moment it's got a 34 tooth on the front, but I'm going to try to go down to a 30 tooth, I think, on the front. So crikey. It's pretty extreme. But when the bike's, you know, it's limited to 25 mile an hour, and you're not really getting much advantage trying to crank a big heavy gear, you know, on the sort of on the descents. So you want to really get that advantage in the climbs.
Couple of final things is you run the bike in the high setting, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What's the reason for that?
Yeah, I run the bike in the high setting. I mean, Santa Cruz, I think I've already got a relatively sort of low bottom bracket.
Yeah, it's not super. It's not super high, even though it's high. It's kind of like 340. It's 346 BB as opposed to 342 BB, which is a great number. So you can corner really well anyway, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, I already feel so planted, and you want a slightly higher bottom bracket just so you can keep the pedals off the rocks.
Your own pedals on this bike, by the way. These are Danny MacAskill stamp pedals, which are, I think they're around about the same size as the standard stamp, right?
Yes, exactly the same. So the stamp, it's the Stamp 7, which would be the small stamps. I run the smalls basically when you're in terrain like we were today on the kind of big mountain paths. There's often tight gaps you're having to squeeze between, whether it's climbing as well, you're trying to just keep your pedals out of the way of the rocks, and that gives you plenty of support.
Tight, terrific gaps, by the way. Cranks are 165 Shimano, I think, on this bike. EP8 motor. Talking about the motor, now there's obviously 2 motor settings on the EP8, and you can also kind of fiddle with the outputs on it as well. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I run the motor in dynamic mode. Gives you a little bit more power sort of feeling. I'm not entirely sure what it does, and then I boost my eco a little bit just so I can say to my friends that I've done the climbing eco.
Interesting.
You know, got to get the advantage where you can.
And I guess you've got spare batteries for the type of ride you do as well, right?
Yeah, I'm always riding with a battery in my backpack. I mean, this bike's now coming with a 720.
Big range, right?
Yeah, so it's up from the 500 on the old Hecklers. So that's going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what I can do. Actually, sometimes I carry 2 spare batteries in my backpack if I'm doing some really big days. So.
And a cool feature of the Heckler is you can actually remove the battery super easily with the 4mm Allen key, like I mentioned earlier. Danny, fantastic. I suppose we could talk about why you go for the MX setup rather than the 29, possibly?
Yeah, I run the MX basically because I'm not the tallest guy, really. I'm 5'8", and yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've actually not tried the bike in 29 before, so I might actually get a back end to give that a shot. But the MX, I just ride really steep trails, and I also do a bit of trials and the videos on it as well, so it just gives me a bit more clearance, really. Yeah.
Fantastic. Danny, thanks so much for having a fantastic time up in Torridon. And riding the trails. Thanks for spending the time to go for the bike check. Folks, if you have any questions about Danny's bike, please let us know in the comments down below. Great.
Cheers.
Great to...
It's been class.
Thanks so much.
It's been so good. Yeah, cheers.